All right, welcome everyone to the Multi-Display Manager webinar. Thank you for your patience. I was indisposed on Friday, so thank you for joining us today. For those who weren't able to make it on Monday, we'll have this recorded and will be posted to the dealer website soon, as quickly as I can get it there. So today we wanted to go through basically everything related to the Multi-Display Manager, help guide you in your setups and configurations to make sure that you are successful and to make sure that this amazing new feature gets out there as quickly as possible. After 16 years with Control4, I should mute my ding, shouldn't I? After 16 years at Control4, 16 years of telling dealers that you cannot have more than one display in a room, showing them how to do workarounds with long excessive programming and adding fake rooms or experience buttons to make this work. I am very excited that we've got a native solution that's almost ready for your customers. We just need your help to get us there. So to kick things off, some basic etiquette. While we're here in Zoom, I've got everyone's audio shut off so you can't interrupt me. But if you do have a question, I want to hear from you. We want to know what questions, what issues you're running into. Put those in the Q&A section. If you're having any problems with so first of all, so that you can see me and see the entire slide instead of having me on top of your slide, that view button up there, if you click on it, I recommend that side-by-side speaker. In our classrooms, we do gallery, but it's just me talking, so you can do side-by-side speaker, and that way you'll see everything in Composer and me. If you're having any problems with your audio, using that audio caret, you can select a different set of speakers. And if you have any questions, use the Q&A. And hopefully we'll get our moderators in there to answer your questions. Otherwise, I'll get to them. Just bear with me as I present and go through all the questions. So, first of all, the beta. We were a little sad that we had to release this as a beta instead of releasing it to your customers, but it was a necessary decision. It was not quite ready for prime time with your customers. We didn't want to cause any problems with paying customers where something didn't quite work. We wanted to work out all those kinks before it got to them. We were pretty close, and it's amazing and fun and it's great, but it just wasn't quite there because there are so many different scenarios, different configurations. Are you doing distributed, or do you just have one source per TV? Are you using Atlona or MOIP or a matrix box, or how are you doing your distributed video, your distributed audio, your sources, your control? Because of all those different scenarios, we needed some more confidence that we can handle everything before we release it to your customers, which brings us to the point of the beta. So we are providing this feature to you in this beta scenario. We're telling you that it's not quite ready for paying customers. Now, if you've got a one-off customer that just can't wait and they understand everything, I'd feel fine if you gave that to them as long as you followed the best practices and the guidelines, and they understand that this may change as we fix bugs and update the driver, the agent, the endpoint, and the user interface. They are all subject to change. Because of all those different unique setups and configurations, the hardware that you're using, we need some confidence that everything we've done on the back end will work with everything you're using inside the rack. And it works with the way they expect it to work. Because that's, in essence, what it all comes down to. If you do it right, but they expect something else, then you did it wrong. Because what they expect is what they're paying for. So we've got to make sure that those expectations are met correctly. If you would like to participate in the beta, you can go to ctrl4.co/MDM beta. All the instructions are there, and that's where you'll get the driver. It'll tell you the steps for setting it up and configuring it. And we'll also go through all of that right now today. All of your questions, concerns, your bugs, your feedback, what you would like us to add should also go in that same forum. I am fairly active on the Facebook groups, but our engineers are not. So in order for all of these to be tracked, added, fixed, and added, we need to have those done through the forum. And hopefully we have enough confidence quickly to release this in the next OS version. So with that, let's get going. First part of this new feature is the first endpoint ever added to a Control4 system, the additional video endpoint. So once you update a controller to 323, you'll notice that when you go to the room in the connections page, there's that new endpoint listed down at the bottom. This endpoint allows you to add multiple displays, more than one display to a single room. And when you connect one, another one will automatically appear down at the bottom. There will always be one more because we don't know how many displays you want. So we're always going to add another just in case you want to use that one as well. The additional video endpoints must be connected before you do the rest of the configuration. The agent will not work correctly until after you've done these endpoint connections. In my little setup, so I'm trying to put together many different scenarios, and I'm working through that right now. So we've got a game room scenario and a sports bar scenario that we'll look at today. And in another webinar, we'll take a look at hotels and restaurants. The point of MultiDisplay Manager was to give multi-display control that's usually seen in retail commercial type environments. And because this is our first iteration, the first release, we wanted to make sure that we had the largest segment taken care of. And from our research, we saw that that was mostly restaurants and sports bars. Those were the biggest segments that would use multiple displays. There are one-offs like fitness areas and hotels, like game rooms or big audio video systems in your customers' basements. We understand that there are additional scenarios, and we want to add our functionality to multi-display as well. But with the initial release, we focused on scenarios like a sports bar, where you've got distributed audio and distributed video, and you want to control those from a single page, single location. So in my composer, for my game room, I already set up my additional video endpoints. In my game room, I already had a projector, and then I added 4 TVs, 2 to the left, 2 to the right, and I made those additional video endpoint connections. We'll do that here with my sports bar. So in my sports bar, I've got many different areas all in a single room, and just for organization, so I can still control them separately, have not 15 devices in a single room. I added them to separate rooms, but I'm going to control them all through the main sports bar room. So in this one room, I'm going to do all of the additional video endpoints. And this is where those new fancy filters on the connections page absolutely come in helpful. So from here, I could say that I'm looking for TV, and that will get rid of all the sources, all the HDMI matrix switches, and I'll connect my host TV, and then the 4 in my main dining area, host TV, the 4 in my main dining area, and then we've got my high tops, left TV, my sports bar. So I've got the projector, so my left That should be my projector, which is not a TV. There we go. So we've got my left, my center, my right, and I'll get to those projectors in a second. And then we've got the back bar. Left, center, and right. Now, something I wanted to point out, some of these displays were already video endpoints. So I pointed out that in my game room, I added all the displays to a single room. So in the game room, all the TVs and the projector, they're all in one room. For organization, I added the displays to the different areas within that big sports bar, which means that the left TV connected itself as the endpoint to the sports bar, and the main TV one connected itself as the video endpoint for the main dining room. We are currently going through testing, this is why it's in beta, to see if this is a supported scenario. So be aware if you're doing existing setups where they're already a video endpoint in a different room and you're trying to make it an additional endpoint in this room, those scenarios may not work the way the feature was set up and designed, especially for the sports bar, restaurant type scenarios. Excuse me. So if you are trying to retrofit your existing home system or an existing scenario, be aware we might not support it being a second endpoint if it's already a video endpoint somewhere else. So the recommendation that we might give you later is to remove those video endpoint connections. That way it's only an additional video endpoint. So best practices, if possible, all the devices should be in the same room, like in the game room scenario. The projector, all the TVs, they were all in one room. Devices should not be connected as a video endpoint and then as an additional video endpoint somewhere else. It might work, but our engineers are telling us it wasn't designed that way. So we're recommending that you don't have it be two different video endpoints for two different rooms. Don't try and fake out the system. That's what we had to do when we did not support multiple displays. So don't double connect a display, don't add fake devices or fake rooms. That's what we're trying to avoid. Do set it up the correct way. Give us the feedback why you would need to try and set up a fake room or a fake device or a fake connection so that we can build out that feature set within the multi-display manager so we won't have to fake things out anymore. The agent. So a new agent in 3.2.3 that you had to side load so that it doesn't get out to your customers yet. Multi-display manager. It's an agent, but we had you load it as a driver. It's because in one of the previous releases, we opened up the SDK for agent development by third parties. So this is our first agent built along that protocol. So in the multi-display manager, you're configuring that wall. Now, if you're thinking about the game room where you've got the main projector and then you've got multiple TVs, they're all on one physical wall. For organization, you might have a couple of walls, but they only have a couple of TVs each. So you could put all those displays on the same wall in Composer, but this is essentially an organizational tool. This is where you're going to control multiple devices from a single page. So as many as you can put on one page while still keeping it convenient, simple, and easy for the end user. You don't want them getting confused trying to figure out what they're trying to control. If there are that many displays and they can't keep things in check, separate it out into a separate wall. And that way they know which one they're controlling, which set of TVs, and they can be designed and laid out so they physically look like that wall over there. So in this setup, you're creating that wall with a single zone of audio. Now remember, the feature was built based off of a sports bar type scenario where you're listening to one thing through the entire sports bar, but you have many games on many different TVs all at the same time. So each wall only supports a single audio endpoint. And due to the limitation of screen size, the displays can only support 6 TVs across and 3 down. So we can only support up to 18 displays within the multi-display manager's wall. So on a single wall, up to 18 devices, but you can have as many walls as the customer needs in order to control all of their displays. They might just have to switch walls to get to the next set of 18. Once you set up the configuration, you have to match them up. So you're going to lay out the physical layout in the agent, and then you're matching up the endpoints to the display. And I'll show you that here in a second. The default sources are an option. You could set a default video source and up at the top, a default audio source. Don't really recommend it because the defaults cannot be edited by the end user. Defaults can only be changed within Composer. So if they wanted to change from this news station to that news station, or always open up with this TV channel instead of that TV channel, it would require a phone call, you logging in remotely. So we have the option for default sources if those defaults will never change. But if you want the customer to be able to change their sources, their presets whenever they want, recommend don't setting the defaults, set them up as presets through the user interface. We'll go through that in a minute. So once you've done all of your endpoint connections on the agents page, you might need to add, if you don't have it already, add that multi-display manager agent. Now, because it's in beta, it's not in the online database, so it's not going to show up unless you register for the beta. ctrl4.co/MDM beta. Once you get the driver added, you can add the agent to your project, and that's where you can add each of those walls. Unlimited walls, up to 18 displays per wall. So as many displays as you need, just divided by 18. So I've got one set up for my game room already. We'll just take a look at that one. I have the projector and then 2 on the left and 2 on the right. So I've already configured the layout. And once you have the layout, you have to match the endpoints up with the displays. So display 1 is my top left TV. Naming your displays uniquely and correctly will save you so much time when you get to this step. And even if it's a weird, dumb name, do what you need to make this work and then go back later and rename that TV based on what they call it. So I've got my top left, 2 is that projector in the middle, 3 is my top right, 4 would be my bottom left, and 5 is my bottom right. Again, those defaults, the end user cannot change, so I'm not going to set anything. I would prefer setting a preset with them and then allowing them to edit that as needed or add additional presets going forward. And then down at the bottom, that save button. Audio source, again, that's the default. Don't recommend it unless it's never going to change. Every time they open shop, they always want this channel. Go ahead and set the default. With my sports bar, I need to set it. So we'll just start from scratch. I'll add a new wall. I'm going to set it for that sports bar and we'll configure, edit that setting. If your sports bar has many walls, I've got the sports ball wall and the projector wall, I've got the back bar, you could set up all those walls individually. To keep things a little simple and show you everything that we can do, I'm going to put everything in a single location. So I'm just going to put everything. Default audio source. I don't like defaults. Now this had 15 different displays, 3 projectors, 12 TVs. So I'm going to need 3 rows, 5 columns each to give me my 15. Now, as needed, you can size the displays. And in my game room scenario, I had plenty of space, so I could make the projector bigger because it's bigger than my TVs. When I'm trying to do 15 displays in a single location, you may not have that luxury, so you might have to keep them all at default size. You may be able to space them out a little bit, just so you have a little more separation between the different sets that you're controlling. So I know I've got my host stand, and then I've got 4 TVs in the back. I've got my 5 for the main sports bar. There were 2 and 3. I don't remember which room, so we'll take a look. So you're just matching them all up. So my left, center, right, there we go. So my back TVs will do, no, I need my 2. Who had just 2? Projector. Center TV. I'm gonna have to save this and go look at my configuration. So host and main was 1, 4, high tops, left and right. All right. So I've got my left TV and my right TV are my high tops. And then I've got a set of 3. And this is where naming them can absolutely help. My back left, my back center, back right. I've got 5 in a row. That was my main sports bar. So I had my left TV, my left projector, my center TV, my right projector, and my right TV. And then that leaves my 1 and 4. So 1 is my sports bar, my host station. And then those last 4, TV 1, 2, 3, and 4. Intimate knowledge of the installation will help keep this simple. Also being in the space where you can look over there and see that I've got 4 and 2 and 1 and 3. That'll help as well. Excuse me. But name them uniquely, even if you have to go back and change those names to help make this process easier for you. Once you've got it laid out, you've got your endpoint set. And if you want, you can set those defaults. Don't really recommend it. I'd recommend doing a refresh navigators. And then I like to double check just to make sure. So in that sports bar, navigator tab on my watch page, I should now see the multi-display manager. And it's also got a submenu. So if you've got presets created, we'll take a look at those in a minute, your presets would show up in here. So now that I have refreshed navigators, pull over my, oh, come on. Trying to get my iPad over here. There we go. So on my interfaces, multi-display manager will show up on an Android tablet, an Apple iPad, and on our T3 and T4 touchscreens. The Neo, it'll show the favorites, the presets, if you favorite them. Same with an SR260. but they don't have the real estate of a tablet or a touchscreen. So Multi-Display Manager only shows up on tablets and touchscreens. So there's my media wall, shows up at the very first. You can see all the displays, you can see all of the sources. I'm going to go into that Multi-Display Manager. Okay, so what I was hoping to show you, media wall showed up on the watch page. I recommend that you favorite it to the room view, and that way they have quick immediate access to it. Once you select it, it'll show all of the different displays. And from there, you can select what you want to watch. You could select a single display, use that carousel to pick your source, or you could select multiple displays at the same time and select a source. And when you select multiples, as many as you want or need, they'll all switch to that input at the same time. Now, if you want a non-channel source, remember the main use case for this was sports bars and restaurants. And in sports bars and restaurants, they're pretty much always playing a TV channel, ESPN or morning news or whatever. So the default scenario that we built out first, this is the first iteration, was for those scenarios, sports bars and restaurants. So the carousel uses the TV channels, whether it's cable or satellite, dish, DirecTV. I know my international guys are all getting upset right now, so hold on a sec. So it was built out for that scenario. If your customers want to use other video sources, the bottom right, there's a little video sources button, and that would show all of your other sources, whether they are your streaming boxes, your cable boxes, your Blu-ray players, Kaleidoscape, whatever they be. Now, for those that are saying, I never use the cable, they would only use the sources. In that case, your customers would have to always use that video button at the bottom right to select their sources. Now, in the future, we already know that you want to be able to carousel through sources, not just channels. So we've got that added to the enhancements list. But for the first iteration, we were trying to aim for the largest segment of users, and the carousel for channels made sense. So let me rewind that just a little bit. So down here at the bottom right, looks like a couple of video cables. Click on that and you'll see all of your sources. You could scroll up and down. Connections matter. So if you have a source, but it's not connected in Composer to your display, we're not going to show it. So just like normally your video, your watch page auto-populates based on your connections, so does this page. Auto-populates based on the sources available to each of those displays. This list will dynamically change based on the sources you select. So if you have sources that are only available to the projector, not available through the video distribution system, then if you select the projector and other TVs, it won't show those projector only sources. Connections page matters. We also have a swap button. Down here at the bottom, the two arrows, each direction. If you select two displays, once I get my new channels up, when you select two displays, you can hit that swap button and it will swap sources between those two. And we can swap back. Now, something I want to point out here. With the Multi-Display Manager, it ignores the video's audio endpoint. By selecting a source, it does not select an audio path. So right now, there's nothing playing. I can't hear anything. Swapping sources does not swap audio path. It ignores the video audio endpoint. So your audio selection is done separately. Down at the bottom left, let me go back just a little bit, bottom left, little speaker, that's your audio selection. So when you press that button, it'll show all the available audio sources for that zone. Now remember, in your agent, you configured the zone. So I said that in this wall, I'm using the game room, that zone of audio. And based on your connections, we'll show you all the sources that are available to that zone. Once you select a source, it'll pop up basically the Now Playing page. Oh, this is my long copy of the video. I was grabbing this so I could do the teaser videos for you all. And once I do 80s rock, that's when it really selected, maybe. There we go. So once you select your audio, pops up your Now Playing, and that's what will show up on the room view Now Playing page. It's not going to show all the different video sources. Your room view is going to show that audio source. Presets. So I don't like the defaults because end users cannot change the defaults. They don't have access to Composer. If your customers always use sources and not channels, presets are the way to go. At the top, the 3 dots and 3 arrows, that little menu button is your preset menu. So currently, I don't have any presets. Click the little pencil. So menu button top right. Click on the little pencil and you can name your preset. And the little snapshot button snapshots all of the sources. So it knows which TV, which display, which projector is looking at which source, and what audio is playing in that zone. You can name it and create as many as you need. So I think this is my long video, so it's going to show me selecting and changing. So everything's now watching that. I name it something else. And then we've got Apple TV because we're doing a Baby Yoda watch party. Grogu, he's got a name now, Grogu. Very excited for Ahsoka. Fire TV. So you're naming all your presets, and I like creating one for off. So also add a preset where everything turns off. Now, something I want to point out here is once you select everything, play from there. There we go. So you've got an off at the top and you've got an off at the bottom. The bottom controls that display, the one you selected. This bottom section disappears when nothing's selected. And when you click on a display or multiple displays, that's when you get the swap button. That's when you get the source selection button, transport controls, and power. So the power at the bottom is just for the selected displays. Power at the top turns everything off, the entire wall. So I could turn off just the projector, or I could use that one and power off everything. Save that as the preset, called it closing time for my sports bar. Now, my preferred recommendation for end users, especially scenarios where they're always doing the same thing. Hotels, most bars, restaurants, they're always using these channels, maybe this set for opening and that set for closing and this set for lunch, but they're always using these channels. I get sports bars will change depending on which game and where and local and not. And so I get sports bars may need more dynamic control, but for most end users, you could favorite those presets, put them on the main page, which now gives them single button control for their multi-display solution, including that off. So as soon as I get in during lunchtime, end of the day, time to go home. So sorry, my demo didn't work, but fortunately I had it pre-recorded. Let's take a look at the chat and see what we've got. So yes, I'm feeling better. Thank you guys. Having channels to choose on the different displays is an important feature. Will we be adding more channels, Canadian or otherwise? So my answer for that, for those that are not US, in the US, we got it easy. You can do a search with your zip code. Oh, is that why? That might be why it didn't work, because I wasn't registered. My little EA one that I was setting up last week might not be registered, and that's why. So we can do a search, put in our US zip code, and it will show the local cable channels, Dish or DirecTV channels that are in this area from that specific provider. We don't have an international version for that. I know that we've attempted a few times to find a provider that could provide us with all the different channels from all the different providers in all the different locations, but obviously we haven't found one that works. So for all my international customers, what I'd recommend is setting this up once. Most of you outside of the US have one, maybe two different providers. I know I've got 3 or 4. I've got AT&T, I've got Spectrum, there's Dish, and there's DirecTV. But outside the US, you usually just have 1 or 2. So it's a little painful, but I would add each channel individually. Go through and add every channel. Make sure you've got nice, pretty cover art. And then when you're done, you can right-click, export media list, and that will save it. That way, when you're on the next job, you can import media list, and that will populate all of the channels with your custom cover art. So outside the US, it does take a little extra effort, but you do it once, you'll never have to do it again. What would cause the icon to be blank in the UI as well as on the iPad? So the Now Playing page, if you're looking at the Now Playing page or the media bar and you don't see an icon here, it might be because you've got a video selection, but not an audio selection. So MultiDisplay Manager handles all the video pathing, but not the audio. Audio, you do through that little button at the bottom corner, and the audio is going to be what shows up here. So if you're trying to control something in that room from right here, you're controlling the audio path. And if one's not selected, you're not going to see anything here. Excuse me. I know that we've gone through a few different bugs where different icons, the wrong icon, multiple of the same icon would show up. And I know we've got a lot of those fixed. So there is going to be an update to MultiDisplay Manager coming soon with all those bug fixes in the next OS release. So that's probably included with what we've seen already. What I'd recommend, Chris, is if you're still seeing that in the forums, make sure that you've got the setup and the logs that we need so we can track down your individual issue. Scrolling through. If we named each area of a tiler. So the MultiDisplay Manager is not a video wall. So it doesn't have scaling capabilities built in. You can use them, but it's not built into MultiDisplay. If you're doing, say, MOIP, there are commands that Control4 can send to a MOIP controller to tell it to go to 2x2 or 3x3 or 4x4, or go back to individual 4 displays. I have used them with experience buttons, and that's what I would recommend here. The caveat is that in controlling things through MultiDisplay and then sending a separate command to a MOIP controller, you kind of have 2 different control systems arguing over each other. So you may not end up where you wanted it to be because you've got 2 different control systems. So that's one of those where you could make it work, but it's probably not going to be the best experience for the end user. In testing, could not get video wall. So I think Jacob meant that MultiDisplay wasn't showing up in Navigator. Couple of troubleshooting steps for that. if you go to the watch page and you don't see multi-display, first of all, make sure you got your endpoints. So until you connect your endpoints, you're not going to see multi-display manager because it's not functional, it's not available. So you have to have multiple endpoints. You have to have the agent configured. And you have to have all those, let me just edit this one. You have to have all those displays set. Refresh navigators. Don't forget to refresh navigators. Now, in the beta, I have seen that it has been hidden by default, or maybe not default. I did something wrong, and so it was hidden. Check to make sure that it's visible. And if you've got any presets, check to see if they're listed here. Sometimes when there aren't items in a submenu, if you don't have any cameras, we're not going to show you the cameras page. So there has been a bug where that came into play, but I believe that's fixed. So if you don't see it under watch here, check your endpoints and check the agent. Can you do programming so audio automatically matches the main display? So if you're doing that switch type scenario, and what you were listening to just changed, you want the audio to change as well. That's currently not built into multi-display manager. So right now I've got ESPN here, but when I swap it, I want ESPN there and I want to hear ESPN. So I want the audio to automatically track my video. Currently not built into the multi-display manager. Your customers could always go to the audio and they could select that source. So when they click on that, you'll see ESPN is one of my audio sources. So they could do it manually. You could do it with custom buttons or experience buttons. So if you just have this type scenario, I could press a button and that selects this source to play in that zone. We've tried to take a look at doing this programmatically. The problem with programming is that we found that every single one of these displays changes the currently selected device in the room variable. So you can't really program when this currently selected device changes, because if you change that TV source, that's a currently selected device change as well. So we're taking a look at ways that we can work around that type of scenario until we can get it built in. So remember, this is, sorry, y'all. This is the first iteration of the multi-display manager. We want to add and build off of it. So we want that type of functionality built in, not there yet. I would say recommended answer would be to use that audio selection and just doing it themselves. In programming. So let me show you a couple of things with programming. So I've got that game room scenario. I'm going to set up some presets. So I showed you how you could do it through the interface. You've got that menu button at the top, or I could add them as the installer here. I could have one for Apple TV, and I could pick a specific source, or I could, through the interface, do that snapshot that captures the current source. So I'll just pretend we're going to do that in the future. So it's not a default, it's a preset they can edit. Actually, this is a preset, so they should be able to edit it. So I will select my Apple TV for everything. And then you could do one for cable, you could do one for Blu-ray player, one for my Xbox. And that enable button is what gets it to show up on Navigator when you refresh. The presets are programmable. So on the programming page, MultiDisplay Manager has programming options for each preset when you select it. So when I select Xbox preset, Apple TV preset, my cable box preset, and for the wall itself, when the wall turns off, when the wall turns on. So I could program when I turn on that wall, sports bar, first thing in the morning or afternoon, when do sports bars open? When I open the sports bar and I press that button, I want to add lighting. I want to disarm, I want to unlock, I want zones of audio, I want all the other zones to kick in. With the MultiDisplay Manager, you're doing a single zone of audio. We're only letting you pick one zone because that's all you can control through the interface at a time. So if you want multiple zones of audio to play the same thing, programming page, you can do that through programming, and that's where room control comes in really helpful. I could program when I enter listen mode, when I pick an audio source, room control on the right, second to last option, sync source between rooms. So my main source is that game room. And I want to add the billiard tables and the bar area and the bathroom and adding all those additional zones. Or if I was doing the sports bar, I would add the host station and the main dining and the high top areas and the back bar areas. And that way, by selecting a single zone of audio through the MultiDisplay Manager, you're now auto-selecting that same source through all the additional zones of audio in the sports bar or the restaurant or the hotel. Checking the other questions you all have. And every time you add a question, my list scrolls back. So depending on channel distribution, matrix versus independent sources, how does channel media with the Multimedia Manager work? How many will we need to add? So that kind of brings us into the last thing. So best practices is the last section. Best practices for the MultiDisplay Manager. The wall should include sets of displays that are controlled together. So if you've got multiple walls, it makes sense to have multiple walls in Composer, so you're controlling them. Getting too many displays on a single page can get confusing for the end user. It's an organizational tool. So combine them in a way that makes it intuitive for the end user. Configure the display so it physically matches. So if one's bigger or they're to the side, do that here in Composer. So when the bartender, when the hostess, when the waiter or waitress, when the bellhop or the concierge needs to change this, they can look at the display, look at the wall, and they can see that it matches up. Each wall will only control a single zone of audio. Additional zones of audio can be managed from the sessions page, added through programming. Room control is your friend. Now, best practices overall. So we have video endpoint should be the main display. If I'm not doing every display, I just want to watch one thing on one TV, that main usual display you're going to use all the time should be your video endpoint. That way the watch page will always work. And then you can also use the MultiDisplay Manager if you want. Video's audio endpoint is ignored by MultiDisplay. So if you select a source within the MultiDisplay user interface, it's not going to select the audio path. You have to select that separately or through programming. One audio zone is controlled. Oh. Audio does not automatically follow the video source selection. So if you swap or you change to a different source, it does not change the audio. You can try and do that through programming. We're looking at building that in automatically, but this is the first release. Additional zones of audio can be added. So think sports bar, I've got zone 1 of the amplifier, but I want zones 2 through 8 as well. You can add those through the sessions page, or you can do it through programming, room control driver. You could also do custom or experience buttons on the interface. And that way they have a button for Sirius XM, a button for ESPN, a button for whatever else. Independent video and audio switching is recommended. So you have one video distribution system for all the displays, and then a separate audio distribution system for your speakers. And that's generally how sports bars are set up. You've got your video matrix switch or your MOI type scenario going to all the displays, but then you've got your audio matrix switch feeding the amplifier separate from your video distribution. Scenarios where you have a single device, like a receiver. It does audio, it does video, it can do multiple sources, but it can only play one source. So if you want Apple TV, but listen to cable box, receiver's not going to be able to do that. So separate audio and video distribution systems is recommended. For video matrix switches, check your configurations, your settings. Make sure that your auto locks, your source stealing settings are set the way they need to, so you don't accidentally have it locked and it cannot go to the other displays in the wall. For your streaming boxes, Apple, Roku, Fire TV, make sure that the on, power on, and off commands, the auto play on selections, let me show you what I mean. So in the driver properties, my rack. So Apple TV, it's the send when you turn it on, send when you turn it off. I would set those to false, because if a second display picks Apple TV, it's going to take me out of my movie and send the menu. Same thing with your Rokus and your Fire TVs, on, power off, on, power on. I don't want it to do anything because you're turning it on for this display just by selecting it. I don't want it to pop me out of the movie. So for streaming boxes, make sure it's not automatically sending commands based on selection or deselection of that source. There are known issues, and that goes back to the question I was just reading. Known issues with configurations that have more displays than there are set-top boxes. I have more TVs than I have cable boxes. Normal Control4 before multi-display, we had very intense logic that would figure out first one in so that we could do the first one out. And that way, if there's 5 people trying to use 4 cable boxes, the first person loses their cable box so the 5th person can see their show. Building that into multi-display is daunting because now you've exponentially increased all the different scenarios. So we thought we had a handle on that, but there are some weird things happening. So be aware, there are known issues. Recommend having 1-to-1 or more than enough cable boxes, satellite boxes than you need for the displays. Or if your customers are smart enough, let them know that if you only have 4 cable boxes, when you select the 5th one on the 5th TV, it's not going to work right. We're trying to build in the collisions. You're trying to use a cable box that doesn't exist, or you're using a cable box that we're going to have to steal from someone else. We're working on ways to provide that type of feedback for the end user so they can intelligently select how they want it to react. But until then, we know that you're going to run into issues unless you have a 1-to-1 scenario. And that was it for the best practices. So let me take a look at these questions again. Is there a minimum processor recommendation? So I'm using an EA1 and I obviously ran into problems. It's probably because I didn't register that controller. And so it's not actually talking to the servers, and I'm trying to run it off an iPad. So it needs to talk to the servers. When it comes to it, setting device commands, power on, channel down, volume up, commands are negligible. That little packet of information, whether it's IP or IR, those commands are negligible. So running the commands for multi-display is different than the interface. The interface itself is going to be what requires the most processing power. From my support system, they're saying that EA5 or a CA10, but it's probably based on the size of your project, the number of displays you're trying to control. So it doesn't have to be, but I'd probably recommend if you've got a customer that wants this type of system, you're going to want to make sure it's guaranteed to always work, and they'll want the most powerful processor available. So could it run on a 1 or a 3? Sure. Hedge your bets and sell them the biggest one possible. Let me start from the bottom and get the rest of these questions. They had a request to tie in MOIP and video wall. So we've heard that request and we're taking a look at it. We got to get this one perfect first, and then we'll start adding additional features like audio following video, like tiling control. Naming, channel choice. Why not just show the sources a group of TVs are on when selected? So Russ, your question is kind of, I want to see the opposite. When I click on a display, I want to see all the sources. So we can take that as an enhancement request and see what we can do with it going forward. Does the multi-display manager override manual changes to the room? It does not. So if I set everything to Fire TV, but then I go to the watch page and I pick Apple TV, it will select Apple TV for that room, for that video endpoint. But if I go back into multi-display manager, you're going to see that this is now Apple TV. So when you send a command, we will process that command. It will show up correctly, but this is not going to block you from using the watch page. And the watch page will not prevent you from using this page. We'll just always send the last command sent. So if you told us to pick Fire TV, we will, even if someone was watching Apple TV. Any other questions? I think I've got everything in the chat. So we will be going through the forums where you sign up for the beta, posting your feedback. We'll be going through the forums, getting your requests, your recommendations, your defects and issues, getting those fixed as quickly as possible. We're hoping for a quick turnaround to get the next OS version out with an updated version of the agent, the room driver, the endpoint, to make sure that we've got this nailed down, stable, solid, and reliable for customer release. We thank you for your participation in the beta and for being here with me today. If you all have any follow-up questions, I would usually say shoot me an email, but we did that live, but we want everything captured in the forums. That way our engineers can jump in and get those written up. So any questions or comments, send those to the forums, MDM Beta. This webinar will be recorded and posted online. It'll be the same link, MDM webinar, once we get it posted, and I'll post on Facebook when it's ready. And then all of the release notes, the smart skills, the user guides for OS 3.2.3 are at that last link. Thank you for being here. Hope to see you again soon.